And we are live. Actually, let me fix this. Hello and welcome to the Lion Show. I'm your host, your favorite coach, Robert Lyon. Today, we have the great privilege of talking to Sunil Godse. He's CEO of Intuitionology, and he's just a very wise man about intuition and taking action and all kinds of awesome stuff. So, Sunil, why don't you introduce yourself and tell everybody kind of who you are and what you're up to?
Yeah, my name is Sunil Godse, founder and CEO of Intuitionology. And so basically my purpose, after I kind of took a deep dive and figuring out what this thing called intuition is to really help people make better decisions and not frankly waste bad decisions because they've ignored their intuition. And so if I can help more people sharpen their intuition and actually take action, then that's how they find success and happiness in their life in every area.
Yeah. So everybody listening, last night I watched his TED Talk. So be sure to go to YouTube, type his name in the search bar, and watch his TED Talk. It's just awesome, all about intuition. So my main question, I don't want to get too like hippy dippy right off the bat, but like, what is our intuition, and like, what do you think it is?
So for me, it's an art and a science. And so when I first found out about this intuition is actually from a business perspective. So my previous life was as before engineering was a entrepreneur and a consultant. And I found that like a lot of people made mistakes. And so the idea that I had when I wrote my first book, Fail Fast, Succeed Faster, was if I documented these mistakes, then if other people are reading this book, they're not going to make them as long as they don't repeat those things. And so when I used to talk on stages around the world, the one question I used to get from people was, okay, Sunil, give me the one thing that I can do that's going to make me successful. I'm thinking, okay, why do you think I interviewed 300 people? I know my inner talk here, 400 pages later, if I was going to give you a one pager or a PDF, I would have done that. So there's not really one thing until I went back to the audio recordings. And when I went back, 80 to 90% of them were using some form of, I should have trusted my intuition. I had this gut feeling. I should have trusted my gut. I knew what the right decision was, but I didn't take it. And so there's this common theme, and I'm going, that's really interesting. So back to your question, what is this thing called intuition? And I really didn't have a definition that I had. So I went online and I'm searching. And so at that time, it was about like voices from God and spirituality and meditation. And I appreciated those. Those weren't definitions that resonated with me. If it resonated for other people, absolutely, that's fine. It didn't stick with me. I went on the online dictionaries. Yeah, kind of, not really. But I just remember these signals that are coming to me. Okay, so there's these signals. And I remember an intuitive channeler in my circle talking about these signals when it came to intuition. So I said, hey, wow, she's in Toronto. So why don't I just go talk to her? And so we talked about intuition. And so she talks about it from an energetic perspective, and that there's really little to no research in it. And so I understood the energy part because in my previous life as an engineer, I remember even steel having an energetic like property. So it has sort of mass and there's a wave like property that it has. And we actually design for that. And if you don't, then what happens is sometimes you see these bridges sway. And that's because of the energetic properties that the waves, the sound waves from the wind or this frequency hits the steel at a certain frequency. And that's why it swings. So that's what it was for me. So okay, I've got these things that are energetic. Fine. What about? But interesting. She said there's no research in it. So I said, okay, who do I know that might give me sort of a scientific research just to confirm that there is nothing? So I reached out to a neurologist that I knew, and I put on the flip on the camera. And my first question is, does intuition exist? And the first thing he says is, it absolutely does. He goes on to a scientific explanation, how he uses it to treat his patients. And then he says the research is getting better and better at actually intuition happening much earlier than we consciously think of it. And I'm thinking, that's really interesting. So if there is research out there, how do I get it? And then that's when I went to for an academic database with all these sort of peer-reviewed articles to see if somebody actually did research. Typed in intuition, hit enter, and boom, thousands and thousands of articles on intuition, MRIs, brain scans. Some of them you'll see, you've seen my TED talk. And so, and one of the premises I remember, like when intuition hit me, I remember I was 5 years old. And so when I was 5, I remember this distinct voice telling me that you can't have video games because my dad was saying I couldn't have video games, and this voice was telling me go door to door to raise money, and that's what I did. I raised $200, and so that was my first brush with intuition, trusting it. And when these other signals that I had, when I didn't listen to my intuition, and you heard on the TED Talk, was I got into engineering as a career, even though I was meant to be an entrepreneur. I had a management contract that I lost all my money, and I had a good friend of mine She was actually being stalked at the time. And so she reached out to me to get some advice. And something was telling me, meet with her that afternoon. And for some reason, I said, let's meet a couple of days later. I ignored that signal. And the very next day, that same guy walked up to her to a bus shelter and put a bullet through her head. And I could have I could have saved that from happening had I given her some advice. So that was really saying, okay, my God. So if I heard it at 5, that I must be born with intuition. And sure enough, there was a research article that said that infants as young as 2 months old have been shown to have intuitive capabilities. And then I also know that what the doctor was saying, Dr. Rathbone, I looked at some research that was showing that intuition actually acts 7 to 10 seconds before they actually take a decision or make an action. And in business, it's no different. They interviewed entrepreneurs and they did research where they measured heart rate and skin conductance as sort of a trigger for intuition. And they found that those triggers happen on average 7 seconds before they made a business decision. So it happens both in the personal side and it happens in the professional side or in the business side as well. And so there's all this research that's showing that it's working. I'm thinking, oh my God, like there's something here. And so now I see the art part and then I see the science part. And so the other thing I notice is okay, if I've got the art and science, first of all, let's look at the art part. Let's look at these signals because I've already looked at the science. What I found is that there were two inventory types of signals. One was a basket of positive signals and one was a basket of negative signals. And so obviously your positive signals are the ones that are telling you to move ahead. And so these are like, for me, it's a flow or the dots connecting. And in one case, there's one CEO that he actually sees this omen that comes up. There's no shape, there's no color, nothing. He can't even visually see it. But whatever he's doing, if he's hiring someone or bringing on a partner or signing a deal with a vendor, and this omen pops up, he stops and he just says yes because he has this confirmation from this omen. And so those are positive signals, and they're very unique to each one of us. And the reason why they're unique and the reason why I couldn't find a definition is because the science shows that your intuition hits what we call the amygdala. That's your fight or flight response. There's no language there. And so it's basically trust, do, run. That's what the amygdala kind of does. And then we put language around it. And so there's no wonder that I couldn't figure out a definition that resonated with me because I need to make my own definition. I put my own thoughts around it. And so when it resonates with me, then I understand it. So if someone does say it's voices from God, that's how they understand it. If someone thinks it comes from meditation, that's how they understand it. So that's how individual these the definitions are and these signals. And so there's also a basket of negative signals, again, very individualistic. And the characteristics of these negative signals is that they actually start very subtle in nature. And these are the ones that we miss because, as Oprah calls it, it's a whisper. It's like sometimes we'll go into everybody's experiences. They go to a situation or room or they meet a person and it's something internally they're thinking something's off, right? And that something is that subtle intuitive signal saying there is something off. And I'm telling you that there is. So either walk away or back off and don't question it because I'm telling you. But oftentimes we just say, I'm just going to keep going, or it's just something's off, but you keep walking ahead anyways. And so then you start missing these negative signals. When you miss the initial subtle negative signals, they're going to start to changing it louder until you can't ignore them anymore. And in some cases, people have attributed like getting into car crashes or accidents because that was their ultimate signal of a life going nowhere or downhill really fast. And in one CEO's case, this was an entrepreneur. And when I was interviewing him, he said, listen, Sunil, I don't know what my signals are. But when I was interviewing him on the different ventures that he failed at when he went in for the wrong reasons, like money or fame or things like that, he kept grabbing his left earlobe. And he finally realized, I think, Sunil, I found my signal. And now he remembers when he used to go into these ventures, he remembers grabbing his left earlobe, thinking he should go to the doctor. When he's talking to his wife about these failed ventures, he's always grabbing his left earlobe. And so now we found a unique intuitive signal for him. He has to wonder if that's signal number 1 or if it's signal number 3. So if it's signal number 3, that means he's missed 2 signals and he's made 2 bad decisions. If he's made 2 bad decisions, it could be simple as, just bumping his toe on a wall. Or in his case, it was headed towards a business that he didn't want to get into and he lost money. And so now we have some real tangible results, lost money, time, energy, tangible results on something really intangible. And so now we have these signals. And the other thing I noticed is that the way that intuition operates, it's like a car. We have these signals, we turn the car on, by pushing a button or turning the keys. And we can hear the engine whir, which are signals, but we won't necessarily need to pop open the hood to figure out what's underneath it, how complicated it is. But I'm so nerdy that that's what I wanted to do. And so I popped the hood on this sort of car called intuition. And I noticed that there's 4 different types of intuition. And the best way to see how these 4 types of intuition work together in a split second in combination with signals is to actually take you through a case study of a non-believer. So this is a friend of mine. This is an investment banker, 30 years, incredibly successful in the Canadian business scene, North American business scene. And so I reached out to him. I say, hey, John, his name's John Rothschild. Can we do an interview on intuition? And he goes, okay, I don't really understand. I don't think intuition exists, but you know what? Come down. I haven't seen you for a while. I'll book an hour, we'll book a boardroom, and then we'll chat for 5 minutes. And the rest of the time we'll just catch up. Because you see, at the time, remember I told you everything was about spirituality and coming from the cosmos, etc. This guy's an investment banker where data and spreadsheets rule his life. There's no way that I thought, or he didn't think, that intuition kind of exists. But there are people that do think, like there's a former NHL hockey coach who tells me it comes from the cosmos. And I'm like, oh, wow. I was thinking like data, and it hits you, but it all depends upon, what people believe. So I turn on the cameras and it's clear. He just said, I'm not sure what we're going to talk about. And I tell him about the CEO that sees omens, and he goes, yeah, I'd like to shake his hand because I just, it doesn't figure into, decisions are made by experience and learning and data. And I said, well, John, I don't know if you know this, but one of the 4 types of intuition is called experiential intuition. And so what it does do is, when you're born, you're soaking up all these experiences around you, and it's putting them in the subconscious area of your brain. So your brain's almost like an iceberg. The subconscious is 90% below water, and the 10% is the conscious above water, just as a visual. So you have this library of experiences that are pummeled in, both formal experience, formal learning, and informal street smarts, good and bad, your experiences and the experiences of others, all constantly being shoved in the subconscious area of your brain. So when it comes time to making a decision, your intuition goes into this library, picks up all the information that's relevant to that particular decision. So by the time it sends you a signal, you're already informed of what the right situation is to go through, what the decision is, because you've already had that experience. You've already seen someone else have that experience, and your intuition knows that you've got the skills and the ability to move ahead. So when you're making a decision, you get the signal, you already know it's the right one. And so, and then sometimes the intuition has you go against the data. And he says, oh, well, I have an interesting example of this. And I say, well, John, do tell. So John was, and his partner in his company was in franchise. He built a lot of franchises. To put a franchise location, he had a benchmarking system where you need a 9 out of 10. And they look at traffic patterns, development, demographics, and they put that all into this sort of crunching of numbers. And so 9 out of 10 means it's a great location for like a McDonald's, A&W, things like that. And so there was this one area that his team had put in as a 5.5 out of 10. It was a dilapidated part of Toronto. Him and his partner are walking in that area, and then they just kind of look around saying, something's just telling me that we should put something here. Now, this is the second of the 4 called situational intuition. They're looking at the situation around, and something is telling me that they got to put a franchise location, even though it's a 5 out of 10, a 5.5 out of 10. The team is mad. They go ahead and put that location. That franchise operation ended up being the most successful from a profit and loss perspective, called the beer market, from their whole portfolio that they had. So then we move into him. We're starting to talk a little bit more about intuition and teamwork and how his partners and decision making in business. And he's starting to get it. He's now using his stories, his experience, his signals, everything about him. I'm just shining a light onto it. So he's defining intuition for himself. And it comes to a particular time where in his career, his purpose needs to change. His purpose was, he didn't want to sit on the sidelines looking at businesses as an investment banker. He actually wanted to run a business. And so he says, yeah, I think I'm done here. My purpose has changed. Not necessarily like that, but he says, I want to do something. I want to be a coach. I don't want to just be on the sidelines. This is exactly what he tells me. And so the third of the 4 is called relational intuition. Relational intuition looks at the people and filters them out to surround yourself with only those who are really there to move your life forward, not yes people. These are people that'll give you constructive criticism. But when you have a certain mission or purpose or drive in life, or you know where you want to go, these people will support you through thick and thin, ups and downs, and really be supportive. And even if it's just one or two people on your hand, fine. But that's all you need. For him, everybody concerned about money, fame, ego, security of that kind of lifestyle, he's making probably 3-4 million a year, was saying, are you nuts? Look at the life that you have. But they never took time to ask John what he wanted, except his wife. And he looks to his wife and he looks at her right in her eyes and says, here's the intuitive signal coming in now. John's words, this just feels right. And his wife obviously says yes. And now we get to the fourth intuitive type, which is called creative intuition. Creative intuition takes all the other three types to assess what kind of decision that you're going to make. If it's just a routine decision, like what are we going to eat and stuff like that, creative intuition is low. But in John's case, creative intuition was very high. And here's the reason why. This is a guy making $3 to $4 million a year, high-end restaurants, limousines, and private jets. And he's going to quit all of that to run a tiny bankrupt restaurant that's on its last legs. Now, he could have picked a business with strong cash flows, good revenue run rate, healthy balance sheet. Not John's intuition. It had to be this particular restaurant. And so he did. Creative intuition got him to quit, walk into that front door. That tiny bankrupt little restaurant ended up being Eastside Mario's location number 1. He grew that to over 1,000 across North America, across different brands. And in the 20 years before he retired, he grew that into $2 billion in revenues, all because of a decision that felt right. And that's the power of intuition.
Wow, man. A lot to unpack there. What was the first? So there was relationship, creative.
Yeah, there's experiential. There's experiential, situational, relational, and creative intuition. And they all work together in a split second, and they communicate with you through these signals. So that's how complicated the car gets, right? And so, but all you need to do is, okay, you've got these 4. I'm just going to close the hood and I'm just going to drive the car, because that's a bit too complicated. And for those who need that sort of language, or they're really interested in finding out how it works, that's great. It reveals a little bit more about what they are. And there's lots of case studies I have to showcase that. But that's how it actually operates.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the $1 million question is like, how do we get more in tune with our intuition? Like, I feel like sometimes just with everything going on in life, our intuition gets like clouded or, covered in dust, and you got to spruce it back up so that you can really hear it clearer. Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so the easiest way, and your listeners or those even watching can do this right now, right after this podcast. And they're probably doing it right now. What they're doing is they're reflecting back to the times that they've either made the right decision or they made the wrong decision. And as I'm talking, they're reliving their experiences and they're going through, oh yeah, I remember when that happened or when this happened. A simple example is a question. When was there a time that you made a bad decision, yet you absolutely knew what the right decision was? Every time I ask that question, when I speak on it, like there's 100% that the arms are up, right? Their hands are up. So the first thing you want to do is really take the time to get yourself outside the noise. And so go if you're walking, cycling, sometimes in the shower. For me, it's also the shower. I get very sort of operational or tactical. In the middle of the night, I'll wake up and I'll have sort of marketing type decisions for the business. And so it all depends on, these are, again, very, very unique to each one of us. We may have common ones like showering or driving long distances, but everybody, again, is going to be unique. When you place yourself in that sort of environment, then you go back to the decisions and you think about, okay, when was there good decisions that I made, and what did it feel like in that moment? And you say, okay, what were those feelings? And you write down those feelings. And you look for new ones, and you look for confirmatory ones. And the more of the more important decisions, the more your signals are accentuated. The more the mundane ones, I'm going to the bathroom or something like that. I'm sure there's a real subtle signal there, and that gets louder over time if you ignore that. That's for sure. But that's not an intuitive signal. That's your body saying, "Listen, I got to empty my bladder." Right. But these are the subtle signals where you make important decisions. They're a little bit more heightened or accentuated. Then you do the same thing, and it's important to start with negative signals first. And the reason why this is where the 7-day challenge comes in that I've got off my website. So the 7-day challenge basically has you pick a problem that you want to solve, and it takes you through a very proprietary 7-step process that's very important to figure out how to use your intuition to solve a problem. And then once you have that template, you've got that template for every decision that you have. I have a fillable PDF worksheet. And so every decision you have, you use this worksheet, and you don't have to deal with who's Sunil Godse ever again, because I've just given you this thing for free. And I'm shining a light on your intuition. It has nothing to do with me. So you take stock of your good decisions, take stock of your bad decisions. And with your bad decisions, remember to really concentrate on, okay, I made a bad decision and it felt like, let's just say it's a voice. And so that's great. You write down voice, but was that the first bad decision, or was that the fourth? Right. So if you can think back to, okay, what was decision number 3? If there was one, and if there was one that was even earlier than that, then what's the signal of that one? And you have to work your way backwards to the first subtle signal, because if you don't, then you're missing 2 or 3 signals. And so whenever they come up, every time you make another decision, if you're missing those signals, you're down 2 bad decisions or 3 bad decisions. And so you're already headed towards a path that's not desirable. You're starting to waste time where you could actually gain that time, right? So the cost is actually twice the cost. It's not just the cost of that bad decision, it's the cost of not making a good decision. And that's called opportunity cost. It's always twice the cost or more. And so when you take stock of those positive and negative signals and you spend the time to do that, the next time you have a decision, wait for a signal. And if it's really, really important, take the time to, if you need to walk again, and because intuition is instant, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be instant in nature if you're not sure, right? So your neurons still have to go from the amygdala to the rational part of your brain and then back to say yes, even though intuition is telling you what the right decision is. You take the time until confident. And what happens is, more often over time, that time shrinks. So in my case, I'm able to make really quick decisions because obviously I'm studying it and I'm talking to so many people all the time. So my intuitive sense, I would call it, is really heightened. I still need some time for the important decisions because I need the dots to connect. I need to still see the strategy. I've got a team in place. So I got to see, okay, what skill sets are my team going to do? Who would I choose? So that stuff still has to happen. So there's no problems if you need to spend time. It's the main thing is that the initial signal is correct. I'm not going to veer away from that. And then I do this with my kids, like they're 9 and 14. So my 9-year-old, she still doesn't understand these signals. She goes, what are these signals? That's formal for her, right? And the way I tell her is I said, well, it's just, have you ever, was there ever something that was telling you to say something and you had to, or you had to move away from something because you felt something was wrong? And she said, yeah, Dad, when I was, it's 2 years ago, I think when she was 7, there was a bullying behavior. And she actually moved away from that because she didn't like the behavior before she got sort of sucked into it like other people did. And then another time she was saying that, yeah, I was actually sitting on Santa's lap and he was asking me questions and his breath was stinking. It's just trapping his nose. And then she goes, but my intuition, she's pointing to her forehead, was telling me for him to eat a candy cane, and he ate a candy cane and his breath smelled much better. So for kids, for her now, I mean, she's still learning it. I'm lucky, for them that they're learning this thing. But even for my 14-year-old, when we were in India and she was 12, if you take a look, she's got some paintings behind her. She's an artist, so those are hers. She saw these, she's been painting since she was 4. And so we went to India. She saw these beautiful art pieces and she realized that this was art from people who had no arms. And she goes, my God, these are normal people. Like, they're disabled, but why don't we celebrate them? Why can't they feel normal? And she said, Dad, I need to do something. And for me, it's okay. It's got to come from you. You let me know when you're ready, because it has to come from her. And 6 months later, we're sitting in front of the TV and she whips her head around and we're playing board games. And so she goes, Dad, I'm ready. I said, I have no clue what she's talking about. And she goes, I'm ready. I said, ready for what? I'm ready. I know what I want to do with you remember those paintings we saw in India? I said, yeah, I'm ready to go move forward with how I can help. And I said, okay, well, what is it? And it was very clear. I'm going to sell my art. I'm going to have a website. I'm going to fundraise money. I'm going to have a pop-up event. And then we're going to have them, invite them to paint for free. Boom, 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 boom. And I said, okay. And so we finished the board game. We get on up on the computer. We register an official Canadian nonprofit federal corporation. We had the website designer come design the website later that week. We had the fundraiser. She wanted $2,500. She raised $5,000, sold all her originals within an hour. We even had someone from Scotland FaceTiming, looking at buying one of her originals. And we had a pop-up event a couple of months after that. And what was really important about purpose, and I talked about when you're in purpose, when we're out of alignment with our values and purpose, this is where our intuition signals get squashed. The purpose that she had, what she wanted to do was really affect people in a meaningful way. Her passion is her art. And the journey and the action we were talking about earlier before we started taping is about action. It's about taking action, which is really where people stumble when it comes to not putting that intuition forward. For her, she put the action, had the pop-up event, and she had this fellow named Carl who had cerebral palsy, and he calls Avni over. And he says, look at what your event's doing to me. And so his left arm is just violently shaking. For those watching, the left arm, my left arm shaking, and he puts his paint, dips his brush in paint and puts it on the canvas, and his left arm settles. And he says, this is what your event is doing to me. This is it's opening up my brain. It's just really good. Thank you so much for what you're doing. And it was at that moment that her purpose was solidified, again, driven by intuition. And that's what we should be doing as people in lives. That's what we should be doing as companies, as entrepreneurs, is taking that purpose and moving that forward. And when you have that kind of a purpose, you self-select the people around you. You attract those that really want to support you. And for a 14-year-old girl, she's already raised over 30,000 people. She's had people, just last week, we had someone just randomly buy something. A couple weeks ago, someone wanted a personalized painting, and because they're in her purpose, they understand her purpose, and they're supporting her that way. And I mean, what a way to live if you can have people around you that were like that. You were clear on your purpose, guided by intuition. I mean, it's just what a fantastic way to live. What a fantastic way to attract your customers and employees around you who know what your purpose is. And that's where our marketing messages come in. That's where leadership should come in. That's where HR practices should come in. That's how we should have our sales when we're talking to customers, is because we tap into their purpose and our product and service fulfills their need. And that's how they're going to pay us for. That's what they're going to pay us for. And when you have them paying you that deeply, another company, first of all, if they want to woo you out of that, they have to have a marketing message that gets me to notice their purpose, but they also have to get me out of the purpose of the company that's already providing me that purpose. So you have 2 or more times the cost.
Yeah.
And for that company that's already got me in, I believe them. Statistics show that the cost of marketing is 6 times less when you have an engaged customer that's giving you recurring revenues because they believe in what you're providing. You can take a look at even just toothpaste or ketchup. Why do we buy one brand versus other? And if I can't have that sort of, even that slight purpose as to why I have French's or Heinz, and Heinz we switched because of some of the tactics they did when they bought out a company. They fired a whole bunch of people for the bottom line up in Canada. And when that happened, we were avid Heinz supporter. And we switched into French's. And French's, they were so smart because their advertising was about, we don't treat our employees that way. We're just talking about ketchup.
Yeah.
Right. Yet I've switched because of that value that resonated with me. I'm sure Heinz is paying millions of dollars for shelf space, above the fold where my eye level higher is, because that's how it works when you have shelf space. So you can have a brand that sits on the bottom shelf, bottom dollar. But if I recognize your brand because your value resonates with me, either I'll buy it there or I'll buy it online. Yeah. And now Heinz has lost me. And there's your business.
Yeah. So cool, man. Well, just from hearing you speak and just being passionate about it, it feels like this is a engineer's mind on intuition, like you really got in the trenches and you really kind of figured it out. So I love that. I'm all about the listener's success. Do you think that there is any other things that we haven't talked about that can really help them with their intuition success or having success with their intuition? So
there's 4 intuitive hurdles that you have to be very, very careful that you don't fall into. And the reason why these hurdles really affect you is that you don't have your alignment of values is weak. And so you don't even know what your values are, or you've put your values in the minds or the hands or the laps of others, like societal norms, like my engineering, or you're listening to people who don't have your intention best at heart, or sometimes you had some kind of past trauma that you really need to get away from. You don't realize it, but a lot of times some of the one-on-one clients I have, we have to work on that past trauma to release the emotions out of it, and then they can move their lives forward. But what happens is when you have a weakened sense of values, then these 4 types of intuition really kind of pummel your signals. And I'll go to them one by one. One is when you hijack through the amygdala, you're either too emotional or too rational. Too emotional because of relationships are like that. You get heightened emotional, even though you may want to leave, or even though you want to treat your relationship a certain way. You're so emotionally involved that you forget that. The contract I had down in Silicon Valley, I was so emotional about the money around that contract that I didn't see the writing on the wall where the contract terms were changing. And my intuition was saying I should have left. But the money, look at the money. Oh my God. And so I was so emotional about it that I went down there, they didn't pay me. And I came back with 25 cents in my bank account. So, and then being too rational, me being an engineer, I followed societal norms, right? Doctor, lawyer, engineer, right? There's only 4 doors: doctor, lawyer, engineer, or failure. I picked door number 3. My dad was an engineer, and that's how I became the engineer, even though my intuition was saying, be the entrepreneur. And so that's what happens when you're being too emotional, being too rational. The other one is ego. And there's 2 sides to ego. One is this, of course, the narcissism. And the other one is called following the herd. So this is where you associate with a group of people or a person, and there's something that you like about them that's not, it's extrinsic in nature. It's like they're wearing brand names, they're connected to, they're cool. You think they're cool. They're connected to famous people. They have a lot of money, whatever it is. We internally know why we're associating with these people, even though they don't fulfill our needs. It doesn't have to be a direct value thing, but when their values really detract away from what our core values are, you got to cut them off, because they're caustic. To you, they're caustic to everybody around you. They slow down your life. And that's again, you're ignoring your intuition. And the last one is fear. And fear is a big one. Fear is the big one that in action. Fear of change, fear of the unknown, fear of failure. So this is where you have an intuitive signal that's telling you need to go in that direction. But because of this thing called fear, you don't. What are other people going to think? I can't do that. I don't have the skills. Are you nuts? So there's all this self-talk that comes in. But remember, that characteristic of intuitive signals is that it's primitive in nature. It already knows you've got those skills. It's not fight or flight, it's fight. So it means that if you've got the skill sets, it's telling you that you've already, because it's gone through your experiential intuition, and you have it in you to do it, then you just got to do it. And a great case study of this is a fellow by the name of David Dane. This guy had cerebral palsy, been in a wheelchair all his life, goes on a vacation. And the one dream he's always had is to finally have the ocean water and the sand in his toes. So he gets his friends to wheel him up to the edge where the water meets the sand. And he stands up and he falls flat on his face. And so he tells me, Sunil, I have 2 things I can do right now. One is I can succumb to the fear and sit right back in that wheelchair and go back and forever regret that I had the opportunity to live out my dream. But I never did, because I feared. Or I can trust my intuition to stand up and walk, take another step, and take another step, and take another step. And that's what he did. And he's pointing to his chin. He says, the water gets up to about here. And that's when he looks back. And he had no clue how far he came. That's what living life like intuition is. You take the steps one by one. You don't worry about what other people think. You don't worry about extrinsic things like money and fame. And that'll come if that's really what you meant for you. And success is internal. All that other stuff is just fake crap out there on social media that's being sold. But that's how you live your life on intuition. And when you take care of the inputs guided by intuition, the outputs always 100% take care of themselves. And then you have everybody around you that's supportive. You're living the life that you want. You're taking the steps that you want. You're getting to situations that you want. You have the career that you want. You're running a business for the right reasons. I mean, your whole life is running on just full cylinders. And what is life all about but that?
Yeah. I love that success is internal. That's really cool. So what do you do if your intuition has ADD, man? Like, there's always so many cool things that we think we should do. And then we're like, we listen. It's like, I guess it's like we kind of decide to listen sometimes and decide not to listen sometimes. But I mean, we've already been kind of covering it, but what do you think is a better way to be discerning, or just always listen to your intuition,
Yeah. So if you've got a number of opportunities in front of you, and it could be personal or professional, what do they really mean for you? And why are you doing that? And so it came up in your mind for a reason. What was it about that specific opportunity that excited you? Was it really because it's driven by a purpose, and let's say in Avni's case, for helping people, or does she want to paint and just make money so that she can feed her ego and look good to her peers? Right. There's a big difference there. Right. And so we as parents need to make sure that she's not doing it for the ego, because if that's the case, I'll shut that down so fast that she won't even know what happened. I'll do it overnight. The whole thing gets pulled. Yeah. And obviously it still exists because we know internally that she's there for the purpose. But are you using it because it looks cool? Are you doing it because it's going to get you financial success? And you have to be careful that financial success is okay because it's a true symbol of success, versus look at other people drive that Ferrari, or imagine if I have a house on the beach. And so you internally know, these are personal internal thoughts, why you want that. And so the more genuine about really having that purpose and listening to that signal, that's really confirmatory, saying, yeah, that is the purpose that you have, then that's what you move in that direction. And don't forget that these things are going to ebb and flow. You're going to meet a lot more people. You're going to have a lot more experiences. You're going to go through ups and downs. You're going to possibly gain some new signals. So your purpose will change. What you want to do will change. Your values will change because you find someone else that has values that really you find interesting. You gain a friendship, and then you do that, or you ignore your intuition, and then it goes downhill, right? And so you have to be careful also not to blame intuition for the wrong things happening. Like if you go through them, intuition is going to say, yeah, you failed. That's fine. Let's learn the lessons from it so you don't repeat it. But I've had one, and some of your podcasts, your listeners may know Mark Metry. He's got the top 100 on iTunes and Humans 2.0. But I had him on my podcast series. And one of the things that he was saying is that sometimes intuition just leads you down the wrong path. And so he developed social anxiety. He felt like he needed to lie to be part of the group, again, the ego. And he lied so much that he lost himself in that process, and he almost took his life. Oh, so I said, well, Mark, if I was to rewind the podcast interview, because I was listening very closely to what he was saying, and I did a couple of times just to make sure. When he starts telling that story, one of the first things he says is that I knew I shouldn't have lied, but when he makes that statement, that's his intuition, even as he's recounting it, saying, no, you shouldn't have lied, but you did. And ego, that hurdle, got him to lie again and again. And he lost his sense of value. He's lost his sense of self. He lost his sense of identity. And for him, the only way to recover from that is to cut that identity off and take his own life. And thankfully he didn't.
Do you ever think like somebody else's intuition is better than yours? Like, should you listen to other people's intuition, or should you always just listen to your intuition? I'm just curious on how you think of that.
Yeah. If that person is a trusted person in my circle, absolutely. So I have got obviously my wife is there, and my kids. The thing with kids is they're not bombarded as much with societal norms and listening to other people and stuff like that. So my kids, I don't want to say sheltered. That's not a great way of saying it, because they're going to experience that. But they're solid in their values of knowing that I can ask them a question and they'll give me an honest answer. And kids are kind of like that. My wife is very intuitive, and I've got 2-3 friends. That's it. Of the thousands and thousands of people I met in my life, I've got 3 friends that I know I can ask them a question, and because they've got my purpose and interest at heart, and they will give me an honest answer in anything that I want, that I think that they've got the knowledge from. And it doesn't necessarily have to be them. Like the 7-day challenge has you solve a problem, but you go and find out what person can solve that problem. So it could be a mentor somewhere else that you trust that can solve that problem for you. And so that's how you use your intuition to pick this. So that's how I kind of leverage the intuition of others to support or refute what I'm thinking, or because I need that extra, or maybe part of my intuitive decision that needs to be fulfilled by a little bit more experience from someone else to confirm. Or the intuitive or the path is not fulfilled yet because I need all those pieces of information, all the experience of others. Then that forms the decision to do something. And now my intuition will give you a signal that yes, if it's not, it's a hesitancy. Why is it a hesitancy? Is it a bad idea? Is it just taking me down the wrong path? Is it against my values? Or do I not have the right information? And so all these are things that you're going to think about when you make that decision. So it's actually a little bit more complex than it is. But when you kind of know sort of these signals come up and you kind of go down these avenues, you get the experience in doing that anyways. And then it just becomes easier and easier as time moves on.
Yeah. Well, one thing I've noticed with all of my like mentors that I've like kind of studied and been around is they always have, they make decisions quick and then they take action quick, and I think that has to do with the intuition, being more in tune, knowing what you're doing. And I think you just kind of hammered that home for me. So I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've asked people before, do you think you should make decisions with your logical mind or your gut? And I mean, you've definitely swayed everybody to the gut now. Go with your intuition.
Yeah. And don't forget that like that logic is already built into that decision, right? Because of experiential intuition. A lot of people don't realize that. They think that, you need to have sort of that's logic, head versus heart. A lot of people swing way too much on the emotional side, where it's actually balanced, right? You've got the signals, which is your heart, which is your emotions. And the logic part is, well, there's 2 parts. There's logic already from your experiential intuition. And then don't forget your neurons actually, 200 miles per hour. So it's not a long time, but it goes through the frontal lobe, which is the rational part anyways. So you've got this experiential intuition. It hits your intuitive abilities. You kind of know very quickly, your logic has already said, yeah, that makes sense. So you almost have a double opt-in, if you want to call it from a marketing perspective, that your intuition is right within a split second. And so that head and heart, the logic is there. So you have to be careful when you say go with your gut. You're not really saying, go willy-nilly on signals. And I mean, if that's your signal and it's voices from God, fantastic. But those voices from God, let's say, already have that experiential intuition component in it. Right. So that voice has already informed you that you already know what you're doing. And so that should give you comfort or confidence that when you actually take a decision on intuition, you've already been there in some raw form of skill set. It's not formal, but you've got the skill sets, you've got the chutzpah, if you've got the gumption, or however you want to describe it from your perspective, your intuition already knows that you can do it. So like David Dame, get up off your wheelchair and just start walking in the ocean.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so many like philosophical questions that come up when you're trying to decipher like what is intuition, because it just goes to show like we are like smarter and more powerful than we even know. And we can really kind of tune into the life that we live, the success that we want, where we're going with our lives, or we can totally tune out and everything can go to crap and we can just, watch it burn. But it's like, how do we know that our ideas are even that good? Like if we just go, like you need a case study where a guy just does nothing but his intuition, and then like sees what happens. That's kind of like the counterbalance. Because if you say yes to everything, or if everything goes perfectly, maybe that's what we're always supposed to be doing. We're not supposed to be getting out of balance. We're not supposed to be getting out of alignment. We're supposed to just like stick to a path and we'll find it. And if it feels right, we have to keep going no matter what.
Yeah, and there's examples of this. So if you go on the intuitionology.com website, I've got sort of these influencers that are there. So you've got people like Gary Vee, not confident, not writing in that genre. Next thing you know, she's a train, and Harry Potter just comes right through her head. Right, it's an intuitive message that comes, and everything, the characters, everything came, and that's how she started the Harry Potter series, all based on intuition. And so these are people that actually live it. And there's like I've interviewed over 1,000 people now, and when I look at, yes, they've been through the hurdles and things of that, which is a necessary learning part to really appreciate what intuition really is. But when you look at the successes they've had, and if you measure success by monetary things, then sure, like these are multimillionaires that have done it. I've had one who went from being in jail. He was a big time drug dealer, $5 million a year, cost Marte, to now making $500,000 a year outside training ex-cons in fitness. He's got over 50,000 people in his program. I've got someone who was on the streets of New York. I think it was New York, LA, homeless, and another homeless person comes up to him to ask him for money. And so he says, "You probably have more money than I do, buddy." And so what that other homeless person tells him, it says, "Change your mindset, change your life." And that was it. That transformed him to start doing videos from his car, videos from the storage area where he slept, gained a following, and today he's a multimillionaire, motivationally speaking, all across the world. One sentence. Yeah. Right? So when you make those decisions trusted by intuition, everything kind of peels away. And you're on your own train, and you attract only those people around you. And it's not meant to be people looking into the windows and saying, "Oh, what is this person doing?" Right? You have to get yourself away from that, because when you actually walk that path, and I often say, I'm on this train. This is the track I'm going on. This is how fast I'm going. If you don't like it, get off at the next station. And if you keep bothering me, I'm going to kick you off myself, because I simply don't have time for people who are not going to understand what my purpose is. My purpose is guided by me. The people I attract are guided by me. There are many people that don't understand what I'm doing. Many people that don't like what I'm doing. I assume, or they're just indifferent. Right? I don't have time to give them attention because I know where I want to go. I'm sharing what I'm doing with my 2 girls to leave a legacy for them, so they can make the right decisions more often than not. Family life is fantastic. I have a great set of friends, and every day I wake up doing stuff like this, telling my story, moving, helping other people, spreading the message about intuition. So like I tell my girls sometimes, I can die tomorrow and I have 0 regrets. So to me, it's like, so what's the meaning of life then? So I wonder what other people say and stuff like that. Yes, it's important to focus on what other people are saying, what they're doing, but you have to do. right? You have to take action, and you now have some education and tool sets. There's a 7-day challenge. Don't worry about me. Go get a mentor that you really respect and you want to learn from, but take the learning that you have and put it into action and start living your life every single day. And boy, oh boy, it's really internally really satisfying.
That's so cool, man. I love it. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit more about the 7-day challenge? I'd like to hear about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the 7-day challenge, what happens is you come in, of course, you sign up and all that's free, by the way. And then you go through a very proprietary 7-step process. And so you solve a problem that's really important to you. And you tell me why it's important to you. There's a fillable PDF. Why is it important? What outcomes are you looking for? What are you trying to shed from that problem? And then what you do is you measure your intuition at the start on a percentage basis. And then what you do is you start with your negative signals to figure out what didn't work in the past. Then you put yourself in a place where you cut out the noise and think about what's going to work, what path should you take, and those are your positive signals. But if you've already done the work on the negative signals, when you're thinking about the path that you need to take to solve this problem, and it's the wrong one, then guess what? Your negative signal is going to come and say, don't put that in there, because you've already done your work on your negative signals. So you take that out, and so what you're left with is, okay, here's what I'm going to do. The next steps to solve this particular problem. Then the next thing is, okay, who's going to solve this problem for me? And this is what we were talking earlier about selecting that one person or persons that are going to help solve that problem. It could be someone in your inner circle, or it could be someone you don't even know. But you have to be very careful with that and not to inject emotion to say, oh, I want my best friend part of this process. If your best friend can't help you with that problem, you shouldn't be including him or her in this process. And then what environment do you need to change, if at all? And then finally take action. And the other thing I have with this 7-day challenge is I've got 2 people who go through each of the tasks with you with the decisions that they made. And one of them, John Harris, actually used the 7-day challenge to sell his house. So at the start of the challenge, they had this realtor that comes in, throws her card and says, you're never going to get market dollar. It's 20,000 under. That's it. It's my experience. You're going to take it. Better take it. And so he used to be a pushover. And so before getting involved with the 7-day challenge, he would have said, oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, absolutely. And he would have gotten scared and badgered into doing that, except that he started using the 7-day challenge. At the end of the 7 days, there was a bidding war for his house, and he ended up selling it for $50,000 over. So that was a $70,000 decision in 7 days. It's a $10,000 a day decision. And the second case study is someone her name's Ashley Michelle. She was actually witness to a homicide. She walked into her boyfriend's apartment. Her boyfriend had just murdered one of their friends in that apartment. She walks in, he closes the door, locks all the doors, puts a knife to her back, and said, you're next. Her intuition got her to settle down, watch him, relational intuition here, and be careful. Told her, be careful. She was assaulted, choked. She was asked to clean up the blood. She refused. And then her intuition got her to find that one intuitive moment where she could escape. And she ran to the door, unlocked it, ran down 18 flights of stairs. And obviously she lived. And so she used the 7-day challenge to minimize the PTSD, depression, anxiety. It's not going to go away. But in 7 days, she was able to go back to the gym to find, remember that we were talking about earlier about cutting out the noise? Yeah. For her, it was the gym. And that's where she can do to get those intuitive thoughts to come in. She was able to start learning how to trust people again. And so she's a huge fan because this 7-day challenge completely transformed her life and continues to do. She still goes back to that, the 7-day challenge. So she's a huge proponent of what I'm doing. So what I say is that if people like John and Ashley can go through the 7-day challenge and find a win, you can absolutely find a solution to any problem that you have in that challenge. So take action, right?
Yeah, definitely, man. That's so cool, man. I love it. I was just thinking about, there's some people that if I ask for their opinion, I do the exact opposite. So,
and that's yeah. So, so you've already typified them or typed them out, right?
Yeah. They fall into a category of, I'm going to do whatever they say the opposite of.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you kind of use it as just kind of a joke or not ask them for advice at all.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's just good to have the good people and have the other people, but listen to the ones that are in tune with their intuition and are smart, man. So I got one more question for you. But before we get into that, why don't you tell everybody the best places to find you online and how to get
Absolutely. So there's intuitionology.com where you can get a 7-day challenge. I'm also on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I'm going to take my stab at TikTok. No dancing, because if I do any dancing, everybody's intuition is going to say I'm going to not follow that guy. There's also Sunil at sunilgodse.com where they can DM me any questions or concerns or answers. And happy to connect.
Awesome, man. So the question I'm asking all my guests is, what motivates you, or what is motivation?
So this was pretty easy for me. So two motivations. One is going to be obviously trusting my intuition to make every single decision the right one, every single time. And the second motivation I have is basically is really my kids and leaving that legacy, because I'm giving them a path that I can't just imagine what's going to happen to their lives just by me sharing this with them. And I'm continuing to do this for others. But with them, I have a little bit more control. With others, I can't. Here's the tools. Here's the advice. Here's the techniques. It's up to you to do what you can. With my kids, I can actually force them, to actually stay on that path. And so that, again, is something that's just really, really, every single day is a joy to see that.
Yeah. Well, I think you're fighting the good fight, man. I think more
Thank
people
you.
need to listen to their intuition, and I think you're doing great stuff. So
Thank you. I appreciate that.
yeah, thank you everybody for investing the time to listen to this show today. I think we had just a lot of insight and a lot of golden nuggets. We learned a lot. So is there anything else you want to say before we wrap it up?
No, I think this has been great. Thanks a lot for the time, the chance, and just to all your listeners, just start today. Just take a piece of paper, get a journal, and just start thinking about those decisions, because start your success today and take action. It's very, very simple.
Yeah. Well, thanks again. Thank you everybody listening. Be sure to like and share, and I'll talk to you guys on the next one. Thank you. Bye.